the thing about, humans, we can arrest our own development. We can, if you talk about succession in natural systems, somebody comes in with a bulldozer and clears an acre of land. And I saw this horrible, awful lot when I lived in Hawaii, because there's all these low density subdivisions, and when some of them are acre lots, and somebody's going to build a house, they just rip the whole acre flat. And then, oops, family emergency or job changed or didn't have enough money, and that acre succession of plants and animals starts to happen. And in that context, with what's in the environment and the climate and the weather and the seasons, what's going to happen on that acre is pretty darn predictable. You're going to get the early pioneer species, they're going to pop up. And I mean, in that context, actually, sometimes they'll just dominate and stay that way. But, you make a big disturbance in a forest or a swamp or a desert, and, the succession is fairly predictable. Like the next wave of species aren't suddenly going to start fighting amongst themselves and have their whole phase fall apart, because they don't fight amongst themselves. Whereas a company that's starting up and gets to a certain point in its development, and all of a sudden the founder is fighting with the people he brought in, or the original group is fighting with each other over what do we really want to do here. And instead of that succession just continuing on to where it was originally visualized to go, it all falls apart, or it goes off in some other direction, which may be perfectly fine for the people who take it that way, but it wasn't what the other people wanted, and so on and so forth. So, we have whatever we want to call it. We can call it self-direction, free will, to the extent that it's free. It's not all totally free. In some subcultures of human interaction, there's this concept of like, we're always at choice. Well, we're always at choice within whatever constraints our life and our traumas and our triggers put on us. So I'm somewhat at choice. But the point being, I'm not a tree, I'm not a small amphibian. I have this ability to think about things in the abstract. I mean, that's, I think, the most fundamental. I think that's pretty fundamental. We make abstractions, and then we think they're real, and then we act on those abstractions as though they were not abstractions, and then we get into trouble and we make messes, and we make beautiful things, and we do amazing stuff too. But I mean, I'm looking out my window and I see, I've got sort of near coastal forest, and there's pine trees and underbrush of different kinds, and like if I went out there and like whacked down 100 square feet of it, it would come back and end up being pretty much like what's around it, and it doesn't have much of a choice. And that's not a problem. It doesn't, it's not like the ecosystem here cares about not having a choice. It just does what it does, and it comes back the way it comes back, and it works for this place. And so the thing with humans is, get a bunch of us together and give us a cleared ground to do something on, and we've got so many choices and so many options, and these abstractions that come in and that we relate with. And so that's why, I don't know, that's kind of why I'm saying we can't just, we can make models and we can make systems and frameworks, but they may very well not work the same way. That sort of idealization, you can say, here's how the succession will work in this organization, and we'll start out this way and we'll grow to this size, and then we'll diversify in this way, and then we'll have created this organism that can do wonderful things in the world, or make the best widgets anybody ever saw, or whatever it is we're trying to do. But the places along that succession path where it can get interrupted or derailed or redirected because it's humans doing all that are countless, I would say. So that's, that's very different than the shrubbery out here on the back edge of my property. It's not going to suddenly decide that it wants to be an oak savanna, because it can't here. It can't. But I, as a human, could try and create an oak savanna here. I would fail because the climate just isn't right and it won't. But I could say, well, this is something I can do because I have whatever free will or something. There's no human created system that's proof against human behavior. These riffs I go on about why, we have to be careful about looking at other living systems and trying to just plug that into human systems is whatever we're seeing is partly we're making some of it up. We're saying, here's what's happening, and here's how we're going to use it ourselves in our human organizations. But some of what's happening there in that other living system is not what we think it is, or we're missing a part. The complexity is always more than we can grasp at once. And so that's one thing. Another thing is then we start trying to imitate that system, but we're not those plants and animals. We're humans with this free will, with this ability to abstract, with this ability to fight with each other over abstractions or real things as well. And real and what's real, that's a whole nother topic, of course. But so, we can get ourselves into trouble that way. Statement about there's no human created system that's proof against human behavior. I mean, anything we come up with, we set some rules and guidelines and so on for ourselves, right? A human system. Here's how we're going to run the organization. And it really doesn't matter what form that takes. An autocracy, a dictatorship is just as vulnerable as, the best possible egalitarian society to human behavior. Because all those rules and social codes and this is how we do things, or this is how we've always done things, can be upset by one or more people just refusing to follow along anymore, right? I mean, with a dictatorship situation, you get the repression and the simmering and the boiling, and at some point it boils over. And even if it's a small uprising and it's put down and the person stays in power, it's going to keep happening. It's an unstable system that someone is trying to stabilize through force, both psychological and physical. It's not a stable system. And if we go to like some other extreme of, I have this thought experiment of, would it be possible for a human culture to be both peaceful and egalitarian and to defend itself against aggressive, non-egalitarian cultures? Would that be possible? And I don't know. I don't think it's never happened in history, because maybe it has, but not forever. Like maybe there was a period of some Aboriginal culture that was that way, and they were able to, fend off whatever the sort of autocrats were that wanted to take over their place or their resources or enslave them or whatever for a while. But obviously we don't have one around right now, so it didn't persist that long. And so at that end of the spectrum, that say you've got a very, peaceful egalitarian culture that's kind of in harmony with its environment and thriving, which, I've been kind of researching and reading and looking into human Aboriginal cultures for quite a while now. And I think we had a lot of that. I think we had a lot of that lasted actually quite a while. And we have trouble seeing it now because we're so focused on, well, who was the king and who won the war, and what artifacts that we value did this culture create. And if we can't find that stuff, then we don't think anything was happening, or we don't think it's worth studying any further, because that's what matters, right? And this is just me paraphrasing. What's the new book, The History of, have you seen that? The History of, or New History of Everything, or I'm totally forgetting the title. But there's a couple books that have come out recently of like new anthropology, kind of turning upside down most of Euro-American anthropological practices and assumptions that have gone on for hundreds of years, saying, no, actually, we've had some pretty amazing cultures and societies. We just don't measure them right because it's not what we think is important.